It's time for a new video from me, the guy who just seems to talk about cybersecurity fundamentals. That seems to be all I talk about. Yay. Careers. I made a video in the past talking about how cybersecurity is a very underserved space. There are essentially a whole bunch of jobs in the cybersecurity space. And even though one of my previous videos talks about why cybersecurity is a terrible career, I'm here to talk today about the different types of careers that you can find in cybersecurity. So, if we're thinking about cybersecurity jobs and cybersecurity careers, cybersecurity is one of those spaces that there are just so many different types of roles to consider. And when someone says, oh, I'm a cybersecurity professional, what does that even mean? It's so nebulous that if you try to tell your family what you do for a living, or you try to explain to a friend, or even someone else who works in cybersecurity, everyone has different ideas of what working in cybersecurity is. So when a lot of people think about cybersecurity, they think of, I've said this in the past, people who are out fighting hackers, and we think about movies like Mission Impossible or 007 when they're out fighting the big bad cyber threats of the world. And really, the different jobs kind of define what you're defending, who you're defending against, what you're supporting, who you're supporting, and we're going to get into that. So before I start ranting on and on, let's just get into some of the fundamental titles and what the different jobs are, because people ask me all the time, so I'm here to finally answer this question. What is it like to work in cybersecurity? And what are some of the different jobs? What are the different jobs like? I'm going to actually make different videos on what different jobs are like, so I'm not going to talk too much about what each type of job in cybersecurity is like in this video. But let's go ahead and start with jobs that are a little more entry level, easier to get into. You don't necessarily have to be the most qualified person in the universe to get these jobs. Maybe you don't need any qualifications other than being willing to work hard. And then I'll talk about more intermediate jobs all the way up to more senior level type jobs. And I'll also touch on, what types of jobs pay a little more. So starting off, the easiest jobs in cybersecurity to get are generally help desk related jobs. There are cybersecurity companies that develop software and other things. They oftentimes have a help desk of their own. And sometimes someone who works at a cybersecurity help desk, they might have a title that might sound a little more fancy, and I'll say specialist of some sort, like security specialist, or say, smack my mic. So it might be like security specialist or some other type of specialist. Another one that's fairly entry level is we have quality assurance positions at cybersecurity companies. So if you want to think of an easy job to get in cybersecurity, you have no qualifications at all, you want to get into the space, well, think of a company that develops cybersecurity tools or software. For example, like there are companies that develop tools called SIMs, there are security awareness platforms, different types of just software. They have a quality assurance team that they hire who test the software and make sure everything works. And it's a very boring job, but at the same time, it's a very easy way to become one of the most qualified people at an entire company because you know everything about the product because you're the one testing it. So it's just an easy way to start in cybersecurity and then rank up to being a person who's developing advanced tools as one of the senior level people. Quality assurance is probably one of the best entry level roles at a company. In all honesty, if you just don't want to go to college, don't want to graduate high school, don't really care about anything, hey, quality assurance job, just stay there for 2 or 3 years and get to know everyone and build some skills on the side, maybe get your company to pay for certifications. A lot of companies will pay for your certifications. That's something to be aware of when you're an entry-level employee at a company. So we have help desk, we have quality assurance. Now something that's a little more intermediate, we start to get into roles like security operations centers and network operations centers. When you hear network operations center, that's usually associated with network engineering. However, security operations centers and network operations centers sometimes are approximately one and the same. If a company doesn't have a dedicated cybersecurity team, working in a NOC, in a network operations center, is going to be the same as working in a security operation center, if that makes any sense. It's a little confusing, which is why cybersecurity is a confusing space to try to get into. So in these roles, we have people who, once again, they'll say specialist, so SOC specialist, NOC specialist, or analyst oftentimes. Generally speaking, if someone is less entry level, their title might say analyst, and if they're a little newer, then they might be more of an associate, so like Security Operations Center associate, or associate engineer, or SOC engineer. So when you hear these titles, that generally means that someone works as some sort of intermediate cybersecurity job. Now, the more entry-level jobs can pay anywhere from $25,000 a year to $60,000 a year for the jobs I was talking about before, but when we start getting into these more intermediate level jobs, you start to get paid anywhere from $50,000 a year to about $90,000 a year. Pretty standard salaries. Oftentimes $90,000 a year for a lot of cybersecurity roles in general kind of peaks out, but there are ways to kind of get past that $90,000 a year salary bracket, depending on the title you're running in the industry as well. So beyond some of these titles, then in the intermediate level, then you also have, I feel like I should probably write some of these down. Maybe I actually wrote a guide. Maybe I'll include those guides at some point in a link in this video. So look at the details below, and I'm going to add a qualifications guide so you can take a look at different types of jobs in the cybersecurity space, so that everything I'm talking about, actually I wrote a guide about it, so my ranting might not be as easy to dig through as the guide that I made. But that aside, SOC analyst, SOC specialist, and this is also where we start to run into consultant roles. One of the more cornerstone positions for a lot of cybersecurity companies is a cybersecurity consultant. Now, a cybersecurity consultant is another very nebulous title, because if you're a cybersecurity consultant, that means that you might be a consultant for a software company who specializes in one type of software. That means you might be someone who works on many types of cybersecurity softwares. Maybe you work for what's called a managed service provider. Now, consultant is just someone who essentially exchanges hours for pay, and consultants, they work a lot, they tend to travel a lot. So if you want to travel and you're looking for a more intermediate level cybersecurity job, consultant roles are where you're going to find a lot of easy travel, and sometimes more travel than you even know what to do with. This is where you'll end up stuck in Singapore or the UK or who knows where around the world for like 3 months to a year. At first it's exciting, and then it might still be exciting, but if you don't like traveling a lot, then you'll start wondering why you're across the ocean in some other place and you never see your friends and family. But it's still an interesting job, and it's a great experience, regardless of whether or not it's something that you would want to stick with or not. So cybersecurity consultants can make up to 6 figures and beyond because of how what's called billing works. And it depends on the company that they work at as well. And consultants tend to get paid a little better than most people in most professions in general. So even if we're talking about a consultant for something other than cybersecurity, consultants generally get paid very well. It's just a lot of work oftentimes, and you are trading hours for pay. It's not like where you're an analyst where you might be working on certain projects, and then once your projects are done, meet your deadlines, and work is rather flexible. You don't have to spend time with customers. Consultants are great for people who want to be around people. If you want to be an analyst or you want to work in a SOC, then analysts and people who work in SOCs and whatnot, they don't have to be around people as much. Now, I would include just general cybersecurity analysts and cybersecurity engineers as a more intermediate role. However, for the most part, they tend to be a little more advanced. So if you're a cybersecurity engineer or a cybersecurity analyst. And this includes consultants too. So consultants go all the way up and they can go up to senior ranks. But that aside, when we get into the more advanced roles, we start running into cybersecurity analyst, not necessarily a SOC analyst or a help desk analyst or a help desk specialist or someone along those lines, where now you are a person who might have your own desk, you might work with a team of analysts, who knows, and you might even be working under the office of a CISO. And this is where you're approaching senior level roles when you are an analyst or an engineer. And you might even, if you're a cybersecurity analyst or a cybersecurity engineer, you might even be teaching a team who's operating a SOC how to do their jobs, managing them and taking what's called escalations, which, if there's a problem that's a little too complicated, then you get to take those more complicated situations on yourself. And it becomes a little more challenging, and oftentimes you might get burnt out very quickly. So these jobs, even 30 hours a week is a reasonable amount of time for a full-time, full-salaried, six-figure worker. I know that sounds like, oh wow, I could work 30 hours a week and make a full salary. And some of them are working 80 hours a week. But it's a lot of mind work, and it's crazy. It's actually less tiring to be on your feet all day and say work as like a waiter at a 5-star restaurant making $80,000 a year than it is to, well, then again, waiting is a hard job too, so I'm not even going to go there. If you've waited tables, you know that's hard. I've done it, because you have to memorize things, you have to take care of your customers, and when you're doing 5-star table waiting, that's a whole nother challenge of itself. So I can't make the parallels there necessarily, but it's a lot of mind work, and even 30 hours a week is going to fry your brain for most people, and you'll see that a lot of workers, they kind of tap out and then they don't want to do anything. They're going to go home and veg for hours, and then oftentimes it's good to take a break to go for a walk or do a workout in the middle of your day. And this is where a lot of specialists in the advanced levels, they have nap rooms, and you might literally be working for a few hours and then you need to go take a 20-minute nap, go pound some caffeine and get back to it afterwards, because you have to be sharp. And sometimes working 40, 50, 60, 70 hours in a very advanced role, your results start to diminish drastically. And so even though it sounds nice, and for the right people it's amazing, and if you're one of those people who prefers problem solving and doing that, it's great. But that's where you start to be cybersecurity engineers, analysts. And then we also have people who work in labs, and you have roles like data scientists at companies that specialize in cybersecurity. Now, there are a lot of data scientists in general. That's also an underserved space, but cybersecurity needs data scientists. And good data scientists are hard to find. If you ever build that skill, it's incredibly valuable, and it's incredibly difficult to keep your job as a data scientist if you don't know what you're doing. Because defining value is what a data scientist does, and if you're a person who struggles to figure out how to define value with data, which is a very difficult skill to build, then it's a job that oftentimes is hard for companies to justify a budget for. So if you're not good and you're not making money for the company, data scientists, they can make $300,000 a year in the cybersecurity space, but the problem is a lot of them are going to get fired, and that's just a reality, unless you're really, really good. And if you get really good, then you're going to be in high demand, you can have those high salaries, and you're doing good work. Even if you work 10 hours a week or 90 hours a week, because the work ebb and flow of a data scientist is project-based, you're going to have times when you're slammed and you're going to have times when you're bored. And that's something to think about if you go into the data science realm of cybersecurity. Throwing a whole lot at you guys right now, so I need to start to wrap it up. From there, we just get into senior level roles or executive level roles. They're all about the same at this point. You can be you can even be a software engineer in the cybersecurity space who develops cybersecurity software. This is a thing. People do that. And obviously, there are tools like SIM technology tools that do analytics and network monitoring tools specialized to be used for cybersecurity. So senior level roles, they generally all pay six figures in cybersecurity or even other technology spaces. And honestly, you can shift to the cybersecurity space if you're in a senior level role from just about any other realm of technology. So you don't even have to start in cybersecurity to get into a high-end cybersecurity role. And then, of course, then we have the CISOs, which is the Chief Information Security Officer, and people who work in what's called the Office of the CISO. I mentioned that a little bit. That's where you have some advanced and senior level workers working generally under the Office of the CISO, and also some entry level mixed in there sometimes. Those are usually interns, and then some intermediate employees. And you can always figure out what path you want to follow if you know what you want to do. If you don't know what you want to do, then that's something to figure out. How can I advance in the cybersecurity space? The answer to that, if you want to advance in the cybersecurity space, is to specialize. Specialization is key. Even being a CISO is a specialization. Being a malware analyst or a senior malware analyst is a specialization. Becoming a principal software engineer for cybersecurity software is a specialization. These are all specializations. So if you want to make up to $200,000 a year, you want to specialize. You don't want to know everything. It's just not a good idea. You want to know one thing and get real good at it, get real deep, and just like dive down into being better at that one thing than everyone else. And is there risk involved with becoming a specialist? Sure, at some point that might be something that ends up getting automated, or it might become a less in-demand role. But usually, like the best specialists, they stay highly employable and highly in demand at that level when it comes to cybersecurity, because even if someone's job gets automated by AI, they can probably apply a lot of their specializations to something else. And so specialization is just something that's very valuable, incredibly valuable, and I recommend it always. So at the end of the day, my first recommendation, if you ever want to work in cybersecurity and get good at it and climb and not just be a person who works on a help desk forever, and let me be clear, you can make six figures working on a cybersecurity help desk. I'm just going to say that too, because that's not to undermine people who do work on help desks, are really good at it, because there are different levels in help desk. You could be help desk at level 1 all the way up to, some companies have up to level 10. I think level 5 is a little more common, but you could literally specialize in help desk and that's a specialization too. So you could start in help desk and specialize in that. You can start with quality assurance and specialize in that and scale all the way up and become a specialist running quality assurance teams or running help desks or being the one who takes the most advanced escalations. So if you ever want to get into cybersecurity, really just think about, what do I want to specialize in? And just start to nail that one thing now. Get really good at it. And other things will follow. You have to learn how to negotiate, and you have to learn how to work with people. Aside from specializations, learning how to work with people is probably the number one way to get raises, the number one way to get advancements, and the number one way to get a significant amount of claim and results. So being good with people, even if you aren't a consultant, is a good idea. So that's what I wanted to say today. At some point when I get around to it, look at the details. If I don't have a qualifications guide in there that you can take a look at, just wait. It'll be there at some point. I just feel lazy right now. But stay sharp, and I'll talk to you another day.